Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, well, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in 2 semesters. The next application deadline for the summer 2023 session is April 4th, and courses start on May 9th. You can learn more at uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280. So today we are really kind of beginning what will be at least a monthly focus on the craft of songwriting and music, particularly here in Rhode Island. And joining us for the first installment of this, I guess we'll call it a series, micro series within the show, is Keith McCurdy of Vudu Sister, and someone who's produced several excellent records right out of Providence. You've been at it for a while, and you've kind of had this journey of, at least from the outside, it seems like you've kind of landed in a really interesting place right now. And we were talking about this just a second ago before we started rolling, that a lot of people don't have a concept of the working musician, the working kind of middle class artist, and being in that space of carving out your own path, your own identity, and finding a way to, continue to create art and also not just survive, but build a life for yourself. I guess talk about that, because you were really onto something interesting right before we started rolling.
Right. Yeah. Not just survive, thrive. And you can't thrive if you can't survive. Yeah, I've been at Vudu Sister has been, it's 12 years old now. Right now we're working on what will be our 5th album. Yeah, I've normally, like most people who grew up poor, who picked up a guitar, you make it work you work horrible jobs over and over again. You get fired, you leave them, you get hired, you get fired. And that was my life for a long time. This last year was the first year that I actually quit a full-time job and have been doing music full-time. So in my 20 plus years of performing on stage, writing songs, and being in bands, this was year 1, like, of being in my opinion, like a real productive working artist. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge shift, and it's like, I mean, it's not that you weren't out there before. Like I know you were on tour and you were doing it.
I worked more than full time. I used to work in group homes, and those are, that job sucked the soul out of me. But, I would work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, not because I wanted to either. A lot of it was forced overtime. And then I had chosen to go back to school to get my degree, and doing that full time, in addition to still performing, still writing, still producing work. And it probably left a significant scar on my psyche.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to form an identity when you're back and forth between, a space, whether it's work or whatever, that it's just, you have to kind of shut down to make money. Like that's a really hard thing to do.
You shut down a significant part of what makes you who you are. With talking about creative types, it's like, when you really make art and this is what you do, it's like, it isn't just, I talk about it in the sense of like, yeah, I want my career to be this, but it's also just like, it's a calling. You can't not do it. And I placated people in my life that, like, they just wouldn't understand that. And like, you tell people things like, yeah, I guess I'll just be a teacher. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just like never wanted to be a teacher, and I tell people that. I used to tell people that, but it's like, well, because if you say like, well, I'm a musician, I'm not trying to be. I am a musician, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it's like you get the typical response from people because, as we were talking about earlier, how like people have a really hard concept to think about like working class, middle class musicians. It's like you're either not one or you're really rich and famous, and that's like the only standard that people seem to have a lot of times. And I think that's just not a good, healthy way to think about it.
Yeah, it's also it gets narrow. It's like a pyramid that is narrower and narrower as you get to towards the quote unquote top in terms of like wealth or anything like that. Like there really are only 500, maybe 1,000 acts that are like in the world, in not just American music, like internationally speaking, that are really at that like active level and that are in that huge money coming in type of scenario. Yeah. Most acts that people like, unless all you do is listen to,
and they're not all great,
and a lot of them are either basically actors or actresses that are kind of just performing a designed, some people will say mind control, some people
corporate manufactured, put together, and people buy it. It's like, oh, it's somebody's kid who they just decided to enter them into like, voice contests and stuff. And
yeah,
some rich person's kid or whatever. I don't know.
It's a totally different world being, you can call it indie, you can call it whatever you want, but it's a different path. And that's where, as I was growing up, and I'm sure for you as well, like a lot of the artists that you really love either lived in that space full time or at one point occupied that space as they were really maybe making some of their best art.
Yeah. I mean, you and I grew up in the 90s, so it's interesting how like MTV was like the apex of like, if you got an MTV, man, oh, you made it. And what was cool then too is like I really trying to move away from this like, oh, this nostalgia guy thing that I'm so guilty of. But it was cool though that was my awakening for music though. So it was like watching bands who were like, they were people who came from poor neighborhoods like me and like poor families, a lot of them, not all of them, but like Kurt Cobain certainly was. And it was just like these alternative rock bands who came from the underground and made it big. You don't see that as much anymore. It's like a lot of real on that level. It's like a lot of really corporate put together stuff, and that's always been there. But I mean, there was just a big movement back then of independent bands actually getting successful, and that was pretty inspiring.
Wait, it's super inspiring, and you think about, for me, it was like WBRU, and then like late night WRIU, like just that. In fact, I have a BRU sticker on my wall from back then, just to like remind like that process and like that organic moment that really from like maybe 94 to like 97. A buddy and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, how like when Smash Mouth or Candlebox, there was like a moment where BRU kind of shifted and you were like, oh, it's over, or it's going to be over soon. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it went from hearing like Porno for Pyros and like Soundgarden and like Riot Grrrl bands to like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, totally. It really shifted out from under itself. And that was like the beginning of this amalgamation of pop. Yeah.
The pop punk thing started in ska and whatever, or I don't know, some of those genres that were coming out late 90s. It's like, okay, all right, I'm all set with this.
Yeah, it could appear on a compilation comfortably with Backstreet Boys.
That's around the time that I started to get into classical music a lot.
Smart play. You just remastered and reissued an excellent record, Bastard Children, which is, talk about that decision-making process to like actually go back in and reissue a record that is now 10 years old.
Yeah. So sometimes I feel like when artists do that, it's like a bad sign, but, or it's just some cut. Well, if it's a big artist, it's usually a money grab. Look, it's the 35th anniversary. We're going to re-release it again. But no, well, this was like Bastard Children. Like I've been playing music for over 20 years. I had never done an album before. for a lot of reasons, but for beyond my control. But like when I started Voodoo Sister, it was important to me. So first of all, the Sister started as a project for me because I've been in and out of bands. I used to only just sing. I didn't play guitar, and occasionally I write my own song completely on a guitar. But like normally they were always collaborative efforts, which is how I used to like to work. I still do. But after being in and out of so many bands, you get in a band, you write a bunch of songs together you feel great about, and then the band breaks up, and then you got to start from scratch again. Voodoo Sister started exclusively for the reason that like I wanted something where it could be a band, but if people leave, I still have my work and I can still continue and I can still be this entity. So then it was important to me that like I want to record an album because I never put one out before. So that's when I did Bastard Children with Greg Holmes, a good friend of mine, and in his basement. And it was a wonderful summer. But, you know, when those came in, my first album, I was 25, 26 or something. And I literally cried when those CDs came in the mail because it's like it was such a big deal for me. So it wasn't really my idea to remix and remaster it. Michael Samos is the one who we were working with a song from that album that we were changing around for a project, and he had the master of the song, and he was like, you know, I'd love to take a stab in remixing and remastering this because, you know, he played on it and he helped kind of produce a little bit of it too. And he has the tools to do it. So I was like, well, all right, if you think you can do it, that'd be great. Because I wanted to do something special for the 10th anniversary. I thought maybe we could just do a show, but I thought it was really wonderful that Mike was able to do that. And it sounds great and really brings new life to it. But, you know, it's a special album. It's also the only album that I actually like. No, it's the only album I make any like little bit of passive income with. For some reason, a few songs on that album were playlisted on Spotify, and like since then, it's like it's given me a tiny little bit of pay a couple of bills with money,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. So I still get people from like different countries, like they keep they'll reach out to me telling me how much they like the song Psalms. But yeah, so you know, it's interesting the journey that album has had.
Yeah, it's fascinating when it gets playlisted years later, or it
Yeah.
continues to grow. It's like a mysterious. Spotify is such a mysterious entity in so many ways, you know.
I chalked that up to because the year after we played the only time we ever did it, we played the Newport Folk Festival. And I think they must have been put on a playlist shortly. I don't know. I really don't know how that happened. If I could figure that out, I wish I could figure that out.
Yeah, do it every time.
Because I mean, I have a lot more work since then.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of typical. I think anybody feels this way about their music. It's like, you know, I wrote those songs like 12 years ago. It's like, I have new stuff, you know. It's actually, I would think is much better, but I'm grateful though. I'm very grateful for what the album has done.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's modest, but so
yeah, I remember that year, of course, that you played the folk festival, and
yeah,
you know,
we had me and Dan Blakeslee stay in your apartment in Queens.
Exactly. We played a couple of shows, yeah. And then and that was an interesting year at the folk festival because it was like, you know, there was still a significant, not over the top, but I remember the Rice Cakes playing. I'm pretty sure Last Good Tooth performed, and it was kind of like, all right, that was like my favorite part of that year's festival was that stage and hanging out there, and like Brian Minto like wandering around or whatever, and you know, just like this because it was legitimate in the sense that if you were from Oklahoma and you came to the folk festival and you walked in, you wouldn't have gone like, oh, these guys are like the local artists. It just happened to be that you were from Rhode Island, and that was like such a magical. Things were really magical at that point in Rhode Island in an interesting way.
Yeah,
and it feels like we're due for another era of just magic and activity, and like the right people and the right bands and the right listeners and everybody kind of coming together around something. Do you sense that too?
I think so. with just speaking for myself, it's like, I mean, I'm older now and I'm much different, and I've learned a lot of different things, mostly through mistakes. And there's a confidence I have now that I didn't really when I was starting with like Voodoo Sister, especially. So it's interesting. The kind of performances I've been navigating through and the kind of choices I've been making have been more deliberate and thoughtful, I think. And yeah, I think we're overdue for that. Hopefully something unexpected, unpredictable.
Yeah.
Especially considering, it's a lot of different genres too that seem to be coming together, and that's pretty nice. I think getting too stuck on a particular genre is unhealthy.
Completely unhealthy. That's the one thing that I really would love to see in Providence that in my time in Brooklyn was really prevalent was you'd have shows. I just played one on New Year's Eve or the day before when you were playing at Askew. I had a show where basically I was the only white artist on the bill, the only singer-songwriter on the bill. And it was incredible. Yeah. Like, because you have an amalgamation of like really performance, experimental stuff, a bunch of hip hop artists, and then kind of a singer-songwriter, folk, indie, alternative act. And
yeah,
people's attention spans can handle that. And it just feels more magical than like, all right, here's like 7 dudes with guitars, like kind of playing alt country.
Even like something that I mean, it's Voodoo Sister for a reason. And something that was always important to me was anytime I was putting a bill together, I really think for me, it's just a personal sticking point. Like I try to have a bill that has women on it. I think that's really important to me. And it's like if it's like, I'm not going to select someone if I don't think it's good music, but it is really important to me to get like women on the bill, for example. I really cannot stand going to a show and it's just a bunch of white dudes, poorly dressed white dudes with guitars again. And it's like, this is so boring. Even I'm sick of that, and I grew up listening to bands like that, but it's like, I mean, most of my musical heroes are actually women. So it's like, I really do like that perspective in art.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, there's nothing worse to me than ending up either on a bill or in an environment where there's a bunch of guys from New England wearing, other than Dan Blakesley, because he's the one person who's like the OG on this. And it's like, he's like the original version of this, but men in cowboy costumes, you know what I mean? Like that aren't from like Texas.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you brought it up because like I'm really grateful for the Bastard Children stuff. And I'm so glad that I have songs on a Spotify playlist. I mean, that is incredible. That's, it's a modest amount of money, but it's like, thank you, Goddess, that I have that. But, the playlist is called Southern Gothic. And it's like, I have like 2 songs that are like flirtations of that genre. And, it was different to me at the time in the early 2010s when there was like a kind of a roots revival thing. But even then I was like, I'm not from the South. I'm not going to sing with an accent and wear like cowboy boots. And, it's like it's a costume. And it was interesting for a little bit because I'd never been around that before that. Like, again, I was in rock bands and I liked, alternative rock. And my go-to was always like the MTV Unplugged stuff and like early Mark Lanigan records was like, that was my approach in my mind of like, or how to approach things like doing acoustic music. But it was just, I really got a bad taste in my mouth from that whole experience because of like some of the personalities and the sort of caricature of it. And it's just like, oh, okay, y'all, or whatever. Yeehaw. Yeah. I don't know. It's just not authentic to me. Like I'm from North Providence. Like, I don't have any business with that. It's talk about cultural appropriation.
Totally.
It's like how I feel when people like, there's like, it's so popular to do this, but like when there's bands that like, they do like the gypsy jazz thing or the gypsy punk thing. And I'm like, they're not Romani people. And I'm like, I have a personal grudge against that because my father was Romani, but
there you go.
Like, say my grandfather grew up in a wagon, man. Like, you're just a gorger, but Anyway,
it's an entire, it's really like you could almost do like an entire series on that, the appropriation of genres, and and not even necessarily do it from like a precious social justice warrior standpoint, but more
no,
from just
because
like
you
a
know what, music
scientific
doesn't,
standpoint.
because there is music that clearly is like inextricably linked to a particular culture.
Yep.
I don't want to sit here and say that nobody should be allowed to play that music and sing those kinds of songs if they don't belong to that culture. I don't think that's right, because artistically you should feel free to do whatever you want. But at the same time, when it's not about whether or not someone can really genuinely love this music and want to play it, and they do it really well, and even if they didn't belong to that culture. It's like people who basically, it's a Halloween costume to some people, it's like, it's just, there's nothing worse to me than inauthenticity. And it transcends music. It's like, I can't stand that. There are people whose opinions I think I might agree with, but like, they're just so inauthentic to me. It's slimy. So it's like, I don't like them. I don't like that. Like, they're just, full of shit. It's like, I can smell it.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm with you.
So yeah, I mean, the urban cowboy thing it's time to put it away. It's like the comic book movies. We're all, some of those are fun, but like, it's time to move on. Can we explore something different?
Yeah.
And like, for me personally, it's like, the album I put out immediately after Bastard Children, like the year I released it, I already started working on a new album with Household Items, which was like, I throw a love letter to like all the grunge I grew up on. I mean, I made it with my dad, who was the one who like used to throw me those tapes of Nirvana and Soundgarden. He had me playing guitar. I mean, he was a bass player. So it's like, it was a really special album to make. And I made it with my very good friend, Alex Garzone, whom I'm working with again for this one. But, it was the antithesis to what I had done before. And like every subsequent release is, at least in I hope, is an attempt to try to explore something new or something different, or like kind of hammer away at something that I think I've got a good grasp on. So that if it's successful, I mean I hope it is, but
right,
like, I mean, we've been done this thing where like I'm convinced, and I think I'm right. I have a theory that like we would really do much better with like metal audiences, because it's dark music. And one of the things that I noticed like early on was like, yeah, I'm playing acoustic guitar and you think it's singer-songwritery, but then like when you're listening to what I'm talking about in the songs or the weird themes I find interesting, it's like I make some people uncomfortable, and it's like, well, this isn't really a good audience for this then. But we played the Necronomicon, which is, that brings together all kinds of weirdos, people like me, dark culture people, whatever. But I was like, it was a really good show for us. Like it was a very successful show for us. And it kind of proved my theory that like those audiences will appreciate and understand what we're trying to do. And, then it's like I just got through some friends of mine who have turned me on to newer musicians that I never heard before, from like labels like Sargent House and Sacred Bones. It's like, it's dark, it's heavy, but it's also sort of romantic and soft, and it's like there's a gothic quality to it, but also folky, but also metal. And I noticed like a lot of the audiences that go to those, that gravitate towards that, sort of intersect with like more like the dark heavy metal audiences and so forth. So I'm like, I have a theory that like we'd probably be much more appreciated by those kinds of audiences. I think I could be wrong.
That makes sense. No, it definitely,
because I know
that makes sense.
Yeah, and we were talking about like mixed kind of genre of shows, which I would love to see more of. And I think Providence is, it's a little stubborn about that. I think I don't know why it doesn't work so much. It should. I hope it does. And like, there should be no reason why you can't go to like a show with a metal band and something different. But then, if you really just want to go to hear loud, fast, and that's more than understandable, then why would you want to hear something that's takes it down a peg or whatever?
Right. No, it's an interesting concept that we'll see how it plays out. We have about 30 seconds left. I guess the best thing is, where can people find your music? Obviously Spotify, but what would you suggest people follow in terms of getting your current releases and then the next record that's
Oh
coming
man,
out?
I make Voodoo Sister. Just make sure you spell it the right way.
Exactly.
VUDU Sister. Well, I just make sure that it's very, very good. It's on every platform: Spotify, Amazon, Bandcamp. I'm always telling people to go to Bandcamp, clearly, because all the money goes to the artist, but people don't like Bandcamp for some reason.
Yeah.
And Instagram, I'm very active on Instagram. I just started getting into TikTok. I hate it, but I'm just trying to be humble and accept that it's probably something I should be doing. I think, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it's important, I guess, right?
So we're just of that generation that kind of missed the boat on that one. But
yeah,
it's fake. So I mean, I'm always posting our shows. Always, like, if you go to Spotify or Bandcamp, the list of our next shows are on there. Facebook, obviously, Instagram. I have like images with the monthly schedule, so I'm pretty active on that. And so yeah, it's not hard to find me.
Yeah. Keith McCurdy, Voodoo Sister, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Bill.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.